Hey everyone, Nathan from Black Belt MTG here. I'm back to bring you another video domain zoo lists that have done really well in recent events. So this past weekend we had a bunch of tournaments. There was the Mana Traders tournament. There was the LMS Sofia, big, huge paper tournament in Europe. And then you also had SCGCon Dallas, which also is a paper tournament. So I kind of looked through all the results and I found 3 lists that were actually all from the LMS at Sofia. So starting off with the kind of most classic list, we've got this domain zoo list. This was piloted to a 7-2 finish, which is very strong with such a large tournament. And if you might recognize this list because it's pretty similar to what my current list, which you can check out my free sideboard guide. But right now we're on this player's also on 3 Orcish Bowmasters. Again, I really like Bowmasters right now in the meta. It's just because those Beanstalk decks are everywhere. So Bowmaster really helps to improve that matchup, as well as being good against some other a lot of other matchups. But that's the primary reason to play Bowmaster is because of all the Beanstalk decks. This player opted for 1 Dromoka's Command over the 4th Nashoba Brawler. I think because of the all of the enchantments right now that are in the format. So you have Leyline Binding, you've got Beanstalk, you've got a lot more enchantments than we did a few months ago. Dromoka's Command could be a good choice in that sort of flex slot, because it's going to be pretty easy to get that 2-for-1. With when you have so many enchantments in play. So often the problem with this card is that sometimes, like if your opponent doesn't have enchantments or you don't have pressure on board, you're going to have issues getting the 2-for-1. But I think now it's kind of a time when this could be good, especially when the answer to Orcish Bowmasters for a lot of these decks is going to be Fire Ice, and Dromoka's Command can prevent that damage. So you can basically save your Bowmaster plus destroy one of the beans. Like that's just a big play, or kill one of their creatures or whatever. So that's why Dromoka's Command I think is a pretty good meta call at this point. But again, we're talking about one of, so it's probably not going to make much difference whether you have the 4th Nashoba Brawler versus 1st Dromoka's Command. Moving on to the sideboard, pretty similar to the sideboard that I've used. A lot of the classic cards. I think Reprieve is pretty good right now. It's not great against the Cascade Bean decks, but it's still great against other kind of like big mana decks. And there's a lot of them, Titan, Tron, decks playing One Ring, decks playing Omnath. Like there's just a ton of them these days. So I think Reprieve is a really great choice. And then Veil of Summer, I'm assuming that's for the scam matchup. And the rest of the sideboard's kind of stock. So that's again, this list was finished 7-2 at the LMS Sofia. So that's a very strong finish. And I'll move on to the next decks. They're gonna the next 2 decks are gonna get a little weirder. As always, I'll save the kind of spiciest deck for last. So we started with the kind of most stock list. And of course, this finished 7-2, so it's definitely great to just go with the stock list because we know it's strong, but we're going to get into some other builds right now. Okay, up next, we have the Scam Zoo build, if you will. This was, again, originally a deck created by Dak Faden07. I think this might actually be the exact 75 or very close to what he was playing. And this kind of allows you to do all these sort of quote-unquote broken things in Modern right now. So in this deck, you have the traditional shell. Oh, sorry, we're hiding a Sign of Draco and Leyline Binding, so let me get them moved over. Okay, so we've got all the kind of traditional zoo powerhouses. We've got Leyline Binding, Sign of Draco, Kavu, Lightning Bolt, and then your playset of Bowmasters. But what you're doing, instead of kind of where we're having some interaction with Stubborn Denial and some other cards, instead what we're doing is we also have the Undying package from the scam list. So we've got Grief, as well as Fury, and then you've got your 6 Undying spells. So what this list allows you to do is you're going to get some hands that are just going to be kind of like the fair grindy zoo hands. Play the fair game plan, play your Kavu, play your Beanstalk, play your Scion, play your threats, and beat down the opponent. But then you're going to also have that like mixed in. You're going to have some of those unfair hands where, okay, I can now reanimate Grief turn 1. I can Scam Fury turn 1 against certain decks, and that's just like really powerful to do. So you've got this 2 of Hidetsugu Consumes All. This is primarily because this deck I think can struggle a little bit against like Hammer Time or decks that are going like really wide. But also this is just a black and red card, so you can pitch it to Fury or Grief, which just helps with the kind of consistency. So this is, again, I think the list that Dak Faden07 played. I will say that there are definitely some downsides to this list. One of them being that you're going to be a little less resilient to Blood Moon, just because. So this list does have the basic forest, and I noticed that this player was not playing with basic plains. I think one kind of innovation we've seen the past few months, or sorry, in recent weeks or so, is that a lot of players have added basic planes to the sideboard just to give them more grind power and sort of more reassurance against Blood Moon decks, because you're actually going to be a bit weaker to Blood Moon with this deck. You don't have basic planes in the main. You're kind of relying, your mana base is even more complex because you have a lot of black cards. So, you need those early swamps, and then you don't have Giganta like the regular list does. So that kind of can be the trickier part, is this deck can be a little worse against Blood Moon than the regular version. Of course, you do have Grief, so you have the option to like discard Blood Moon, and that can give you some more resiliency here. So, but I have seen that some lists have now like maybe cut a Boseiju to put a planes back in the sideboard, and then they just bring in the planes against possible Blood Moon decks. So you've got your Stubborn Denials in the sideboard, and that's mostly because a lot of times you're stubbing a removal spell, and with Not Dead After All, you're kind of getting that effect anyway. So like if someone Unholy Heats a Kavu or Fatal Pushes a Kavu or whatever, you can Not Dead After All and get it back bigger. So you do have stub in the sideboard because you're obviously going to want that for those combo matchups where you just need that counter magic. And additionally, you've got some other spells like Unmoored Ego is again also going to come in those control matchups, because this deck, although you can have the explosive starts, sometimes you might just be a little slower because you don't have those one-drop threats applying pressure like Ragavan and Nacatl. So you might need a few more cards against kind of those combo decks. So that's why he has that. And then again, just some more removal. Tear Asunder, always good. And then Graveyard Haze, Leyline of the Void. Again, you have Grief in the deck, so the downside of Leyline of the Void is that, you draw it later in the game, but with Grief, you can pitch it, so, it probably tips the favor of using Leyline. So yeah, this was a list that was piloted, I think, to a 6-2-2 or something, or very strong finish again, also at that same Grand Open qualifier. So definitely a powerful list, and definitely like a fun list too, obviously, because who doesn't like, drawing cards with Beanstalk and then doing Undying stuff. So you get to kind of do all the powerful stuff in Modern right now in one deck, while you're also playing Kavu, Scion, Binding, basically all the good cards in Modern, plus the Zoo staples that are always fun to play, are all in one deck. So definitely a powerful deck, definitely a cool deck. Okay, last but not least, we have a list that I've featured before. Although I don't know if this exact 75 was the list. I believe it's originally an Aspiring Spike Brew. I have seen a few players have success with this list. This list went 6-2-1 at the that same Grand Open qualifier. So yeah, again, also a giant tournament, the same one that I've gotten other results for. Very strong result with this list. So at first glance, this list might seem very confusing because you are playing Calibrated Blast. This is kind of a well-known combo card. You're trying to basically reveal a high mana cost card from your library and then blast the opponent. Unlike traditional Calibrated Blast lists, this list is more plays like can play a fair mid-range game plan, or it can play the kind of Calibrated Blast win game plan. So you kind of have multiple options depending on the matchup. Opponent might bring in hate, depending on the hand you have, things like that. So you might say, well, Calibrated Blast, we have all these like 2-drops and stuff. How does that work? Well, because the way you're going to set up your Calibrated Blast with your huge like Shadow Mortality Sign of Draco, to blast for 15 or 12, is that you are playing Witch's Cottage. So Witch's Cottage requires you to control 3 or more swamps. So you're going to have your entire mana base is built on swamps, shocks and such. And then you have Ren 6 to help ensure your land drops. You have some card draw with Up the Beanstalk, so you'll see more cards. And then what you can do is once you get to once you can have this enter untapped, so basically turn 4, assuming you hit your land drops, then you put a creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. So what you're trying to do is get one of these big payoffs like Shadow Mortality or Sign of Draco into your graveyard. You have a few ways to do that. You can do it with a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. You can do it with Territorial Kavu. You could also, even in a pinch, like Calibrated Blast for 5 damage, if you want to put a Fury on top, things like that. So you have a few options. Also, Witch's Cottage just can just be good in like a fair game plan because it just helps you get back threats. So if your opponent kills your Kavu, kills your Fury, kills your Scion, you can just like put it back on top of your deck, draw it, and then play it the following turn. So again, the fair game plan on this deck is like very strong, and I think that's why it's does so well. So it's kind of like a kind of mid-rangey fair deck. You're gonna have a lot of the same Zoo cards that we've been seeing in all 3 shells: your Kavus, your Scions, your Bindings. But here, you've got your Calibrated Blast, you got your Fable Mirror Breaker, very good kind of for that grind power. Ren 6 to help hit land drops, also very good for grinding matchups. And and then that's what you're trying to do. So it can, I think, present some problems for opponents because they have to decide, well, am I going to try to protect against the Calibrated Blast kill, or am I going to try to, play this fair, and then they just outgrind me, Fable the Mirror Breaker with like, value. So up the Beanstalk, things like that. So very cool list. Again, I think this is originally Inspiring Spike, at least the idea with the Witch's Cottage plus Calibrated Blast. I think the deck got some upgrades with Beanstalk in a recent set, so it just kind of fits well into the deck of seeing more your, drawing more cards, seeing more of your deck. You obviously have a lot of cards that, you have a fair number of cards that trigger Beanstalk, so you've got 8 plus 3, so 11 cards basically that trigger Beanstalk, which is most lists that are playing Beanstalk are playing like 12 cards that trigger it, so you're like right on line with that. There's a world where I guess you could hard cast Shadow Immortality if your life total is like really low, but it's kind of uncommon. But again, that would also trigger Beanstalk. And then the sideboard looks like he's just got some hate cards for various different matchups. I'm assuming the Tron matchup isn't amazing, and that's why he's playing all the Charmaws, Wear Tear, Chalices, Teferi, just kind of typical hate you might see. So yeah, this is definitely like the spiciest list of them all. Again, I have featured a similar deck. I don't know if this is exact 75, but it's great to see something like this doing so well in such a large event, because it kind of adds legitimacy that this is more than just a meme deck. This is a deck that actually, has the power to win a lot in large tournaments. So again, I just wanted to run through, kind of deep dive these 3 different Zoo decks. And you can try whichever one you want that sort of fits your play style and fits your preferences, but I think all of them are great choices in the current meta, and that's all been demonstrated by this past weekend, where all these put up like really strong finishes in a very large event. So if you enjoy this kind of content, you can subscribe. Again, you can check out my free sideboard guide in the description. Check me out on YouTube, Twitter, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.